Hey, everybody, and welcome to Adapt or Perish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
And I'm Ian Averill, and today we're talking about poison.
I'm conflicted about something.
Okay.
So this is now the 5th episode where we're talking about a Roald Dahl story.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make him a friend of the pod? Or is he going to join Charlton Heston as an official enemy of the pod? We love his work.
Mm-hmm.
But go back to all our old episodes. And it's a mini episode. We don't have a lot of time to talk about how much of a bigot he was, but he was.
Mm-hmm.
But here we are talking about Roald Dahl again because his work is so good and his work is inescapable.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, we did The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and The Swan as one of our first, it might have been our first mini episode.
It was, yeah.
We've also done Fantastic Mr. Fox, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're doing Poison. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do Poison specifically, even though I certainly think it's one of his lesser known works, it has been adapted a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the shorts that Wes Anderson adapted in 2023, along with The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and The Swan and The Rat Catcher. So Poison was a story that Roald Dahl wrote in 1950 that was published in Collier's. And then I think it was published later in the book Tales of the Unexpected, which also became the title of the Roald Dahl show.
Mm-hmm.
One of the episodes of that show was an adaptation of this story, Poison. So there's 3 versions we're going to talk about in addition to the short story. In 1958, there was an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents that adapted it, directed by Hitchcock himself, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 1980, there was an episode of Tales of the Unexpected, which was the show all about Roald Dahl stories. And then in 2023, there was the Wes Anderson short film. But getting back to the short story, there is, I don't want to call it a twist, but it has an interesting ending that we are going to spoil probably in the next minute or two. If you are interested at all in experiencing this, search for the story and read it because it's very short, or watch the one that's on Netflix. Watch the Wes Anderson one, and then you can come back and you can listen. If you're not interested in doing that, we're just going to keep going. So the story is set in India during British rule in the 40s. The main character, Harry Pope, is in bed, and he has a problem. The problem is that there is a venomous snake called a kite, which has crawled onto his stomach underneath the covers. And he dare not move, for if he were to move, it would bite him, and he would surely die. And he is not the narrator of the story. The narrator of the story is his friend, Timber Woods, which is a great name. So Timber describes coming in and finding Harry in the bed, and Harry's just like whispering at him, "Don't make any noise. This thing, you got to help me.
Take your shoes off. Don't make any noise.
Yeah. And like Timber's like, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'll do that. I believe you because you seem like you're in a bad way. And they end up getting the doctor, Dr. Ganderbai, a local Indian doctor, and they just go through a whole bunch of things trying to figure out like what can they do about this snake that is surely there because Harry's a trustworthy person and he's clearly in a bad way. They go through a number of different things. It's all very, very tense. And I think the tension is like palpable and effective. When it ends, they finally feel like after they have like doused his bed in chloroform to knock the snake out.
There's no way this thing is conscious. Like,
right.
I'm surprised that Harry is still conscious.
Yeah.
It also just makes me think of that if you actually did this, like they're all like leaning over the bed too. So it's like, wouldn't it anesthetize everybody? Like,
yeah,
maybe, the traditional depiction of chloroform being put on a cloth and being put over people's mouths. Maybe it really does have to be that directly inhaled. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how chloroform works.
Neither do I. Not important. It's a story. It's fiction.
It's very important.
The story ends when they pull back the sheet. How did the end of the story make you feel?
I don't know.
Right?
Honestly, like I finished this story and the adaptations a few weeks ago. Like I'm still struggling with it. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I like it because it's like unexpected, but also like realistic.
Yeah.
I guess.
Because there is no snake.
Yeah, there's no snake.
And the story just kind of ends with Harry jumping up and down on the bed, freaking out. And Ganderbai, like, I like the way Dahl writes it because it goes through so many levels because it's Timber describing the doctor saying to Harry in a tone that he doesn't think the doctor intended.
Yeah.
Are you sure you didn't dream it?
Right.
Harry gets really mad and starts throwing like racial epithets at this guy.
Yeah.
And they leave, and the story ends with Dr. Ganderby saying to Timber, your boy needs a vacation.
Yeah, it's like I also enjoy how he writes the doctor asking the question, in that he makes it clear it's just like, this is asking this person in this situation, are you sure you didn't imagine this, is one of those things that is like borderline incapable of not sounding condescending.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
And I think he does a good job of illustrating that, where he's basically just saying like, he sounded condescending, but I'm sure, like, I don't think he wanted to. No,
like,
but you can't not. So,
and I think talking about it is kind of telling me how I felt about it, which is that I liked it, because when I first read it, my feeling was, what the fuck is this? What?
No snake?
What are you talking about? How can there be no and it's just like the story ends and I'm just sitting there. And the one feeling I got immediately afterwards was like, this was the point. The way I'm feeling right now is the point.
Yeah.
Because this is not a way I normally feel after reading a short story. And that's the power of something like that. That's the power of fiction, especially a short story. Like, if it had been a movie, it would have been almost insulting because you would have invested so much time in it, but you didn't really. It's just a short story. You didn't invest that much time in it. Yeah. So it's not like you spent too much time sitting in the tension of the moment. So when the tension is popped, it definitely is a weird feeling, but I didn't feel like cheated. I didn't feel like Dahl was making fun of me.
It's one of those things where I didn't know how to feel, because I'm just like, what are the themes? Like, what is this saying?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's definitely like, there's stuff you can read into, but it's all stuff that like doesn't necessarily, like, it's all like, obviously there's themes of like maybe like hypochondria, like like or anxiety just in general, and like a person just always thinking that there's something wrong or they've been poisoned, or and it all kind of being in their own head. Is that some kind of theme here? And the answer is maybe. You know?
Right. Oh, like, and that's another thing that I found confusing too while I'm reading it, is like, the story's called Poison.
Yeah.
And it's about a guy who has not been bitten by a venomous snake.
Right.
But there is a point in it where Ganderby says to Timber, go back to my office, go to my cabinet, it's marked poison.
Right.
And find my chloroform. So like,
right.
It seemed like the poison is referring to the chloroform at this point, what they're doing to the snake.
Or just kind of all substances like that. I don't know.
But that's what I'm saying, is like, that's what it's referring to, and we could try to dig into what it means, but I think it's just what Dahl wrote.
And I mean, the story does have a little bit of room in interpretation in it, of like, maybe there was a snake at the beginning,
sure, and
it left, but like, there's no real weight given to that, to the point where like, the story, I think, is saying that there never was a snake, but who's to say?
Yeah, certainly not Dahl.
No. Yeah, I mean, I did a search to see if he ever like really went into detail about the themes of the story, and I didn't find anything. But I mean, it was very light research I did. But
yeah, I feel like people weren't asking him about poison.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's the great thing about a lot of these short stories, is that no one was really paying much attention to them.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
They kind of just have to speak for themselves for all time, you know. Which is nice.
But yeah, I do think the most memorable part of the story is the fact that there is no snake.
Yeah.
That's the thing that makes the story special.
Sure. And the very pointed, like, him being incredibly racist towards the doctor.
Yeah.
When insecure, immediately, you know, shows his true colors, I guess you could say, is kind of what happens. Not that he was, like, particularly nice to him beforehand, because he thought he was had a snake. And he wasn't being nice to anybody. But
yeah, I do think, to Dahl's credit, as much credit as anyone would be willing to give him, like, he's not presenting Harry's racism in those last few moments. He's not presenting it as like understandable.
Right. No. That's the other thing that's interesting, is that the racism point at the end is part of the point, and part of and saying that he's bad for that, you know,
right?
For lack of a better word.
So then we get to our first adaptation, because in 1958, in season 4, the first episode of the season of Alfred Hitchcock Presents was Poison. Came out in October 1958. It was, as I said, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, written by Casey Robinson. It starred James Donald as Harry, Wendell Corey as Timber, and Arnold Moss as Dr. Ganderby in this version. Had you ever watched any Alfred Hitchcock Presents? Because I have not watched very much of it at all.
No, I have never. It's one of the, like, I love anthology shows like that, like, so much. And there's such a amazing amount of them that I like would love to just for fun tackle all of someday, you know, like I've tried to go through all of Twilight Zone and
Sure.
like stuff like that. Not that these are exactly the same as that, but just all those old anthology shows, I'd love to go through all of them. And this is the first one I'd seen, and I was I knew that Hitchcock like bookended each story in each episode, you know?
Yeah.
I had somehow not been prepared for his like goofy ass jokes that he does and like weird bits and stuff. And like
It's way more bits than I expected.
yeah, he's such a weird presence for the whole like opening and closing guy. Weird dude, Hitchcock.
Yeah, super weird dude.
Seems like a weird dude.
I feel like in looking at the actual story, the thing that I felt while I was watching it is like I didn't know for sure because I'd already read the story, but it felt like Hitchcock decided to go for comedy over tension.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
because like, and that's putting aside the intro and the outro to the episode, which are just comedy. But like the one thing that really jumped out at me about this, other than the fact that there is a snake.
Yes,
because of course it's the most memorable part of the short story. There's no snake. So in this version, there is a snake.
Both of these, well, not to spoil, but this one and the next one we're talking about, they do the thing where they're just like, well, there can't be no snake. There has to be a snake.
Yes. In this one, Timber gets there. We don't know that there's no snake. We don't know that there's a snake until the end. Then we see the snake in the bed. Now, what ends up happening is throughout this version, whereas in the story, this I think is the biggest change because it's not just the snake, but in the story, Timber is sold. Timber is like, Harry, we're going to save you. In this version, Timber is not taking him seriously pretty much ever.
Yeah.
I feel like this does a couple of things. Like one, it's leaning into the comedy. Two, I found it kind of hard as an audience member to take Harry seriously because Timber was never taking him seriously.
And I think it does a third thing. It makes Timber seem sinister and mean and a bad dude, which is what it's intending to do because that's the direction this one was going.
Right. Because Timber's the bad guy and he gets his comeuppance because while they're talking, we, the audience, see a goddamn snake in the bed.
Yeah.
And Timber's been making fun of Harry this entire time, and he like lies down on the bed talking to Harry, puts his head beside the pillow where we know the snake is, suddenly shoots up because he's been bitten.
Yeah, in the face.
Yeah, Harry's like, stop making fun of me. And he's like, no, there really was a snake. There was a snake the whole time. And like, I feel like what happens at this point basically amounts to murder.
Yeah.
Even Hitchcock says this. Because he, like, in his outro, he's like, and Harry ended up going to prison for not calling the doctor. But Harry's, like, looking at Timber going, like, yeah, this is what you get.
Right, because, I mean, Timber was a bad dude. Like, he was basically, while Harry was trapped in bed, Timber was, like, making veiled threats and, like, was very purposefully, very pointedly not being quiet when Harry was asking him to be quiet because of the snake. So it became very clear that Timber kind of wanted the snake to bite him.
Well, Timber just didn't believe the snake was there. Like, he never really did. The doctor was, like, super on board. The doctor was like, he says there's a snake. There's a snake. We got to assume there is. And there is no snake. And Harry does the thing where he jumps up on the bed and yells at the doctor. And then, of course, as in the short story, Timber fucking dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there is a snake. I get it, but I don't like it. Like, I get I get the drive to put a snake in the story.
Yeah. And to have there be a bad guy who there's a twist and he gets his comeuppance by being bit by the snake.
Like, I don't want to say, you know what? I think they made the right decision because audiences in 1958 probably wouldn't have liked this episode if it ended with no snake. But, like, I don't know. Maybe they would have. It seems like Hitch thought that.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, because 1980 also takes some interesting liberties with the story. So the fifth episode of season 2 of Tales of the Unexpected came out in 1980. This was the Roald Dahl kind of introduced anthology show. So Roald Dahl's at the beginning. I think he's at the beginning of every episode. And he's at the beginning of this one. He's telling you about snakes. And he's like, there is a very poisonous snake. What is it, the mamba?
Well, because there's the black mamba and there's a bunch of different ones, but
And he tells this whole story about watching someone get bit and dying from a black mamba bite. And then at the end he goes, there's another snake that's also poisonous. It's called a kite. this story is about a kite. And then the story starts.
Yeah, it was very funny. I think he probably just like the, different regional snakes. So
Yeah.
he had the one that he had actual experience with, and he wanted to tell that story, but then he wanted to do this story set where it was in India. So like he was just like, well, what snakes do they have there that are like that? Great. Okay. We'll go with that.
So it was directed by Graham Evans. It was written by Robin Chapman. It starred Andrew Ray as Harry Pope, Anthony Steele as Timber Woods, Saeed Jaffrey as Dr. Kunzru in this one. They have changed his name. And it stars, obviously, we talked at length about Sandra in the short story, but it stars Judy Geeson as fan favorite star of the short story Poison, Sandra. Man, this dame, I tell you, this daffy dame, I tell you.
Yeah, this one has a fourth character.
Yeah.
Who is, it's just very interesting for the time, but it's like, I like how, first of all, it shows Timber at the like social club that he was at before driving home. And then I don't know, like this lady is just a lady at the social club that like, I don't know, there seems to be some very she's married.
She's definitely cheating on someone with Timber.
Right. But I don't know, I got the sense that like she's being portrayed as cheating on her husband a lot.
Yeah.
With probably like a bunch of people at the club.
This episode, it just adds a thing that the other ones don't have, which is all the creators looking at the camera and going, women, am I right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she's awful.
The story and other adaptations blissfully free of that.
Yes. Not blissfully free of women, but blissfully free of the misogyny. They're all very focused.
That's what I mean.
They're such focused stories that I don't really think about it that much.
Yeah.
So she's there the whole time not taking it seriously and getting in the way, and she ends up stealing the doctor's car because it's kind of like it's like an episode of Frasier where Timber has to keep her secret from the doctor. So there's this whole other thing that's happening.
She's even mad that Harry was awake and we'll find out that she's there.
Yeah.
And she definitely doesn't want the doctor to see her because it'll all get back to her husband. Yeah, a little bit of a comedy of errors.
Getting back to the snake and getting back to Harry, the way the whole thing starts is we see Harry alone in the house. They kind of, they stretch things out. It feels weird to say that stretching the story to half an hour makes it, I think, too long.
They give him a little bit of expanded context. He's stationed in India, but it's clear that he hates it there. Yeah. And he's excited to leave.
Right. And he's also a recovering alcoholic. So that is one of the things that comes up for the rest of the episode is there, like Timber is constantly saying, you either hallucinated it or you're drunk. And that's what's happening. And it's causing a rift between the two friends.
It's like, it's a can't win scenario for people with drinking problems where your friends, something happens to you and your friends say either you are in withdrawals and you hallucinated it because you're a drunk, or you hallucinated it because you're drunk because you're a drunk.
Yeah, Harry's in a rough spot, not just because of that, but also there's a goddamn snake on his stomach. Because we see the snake at the beginning.
Once again, we've seen it. The audience sees it. It is real.
He gets in bed. In this one, we actually see the snake like slithering onto him and slithering down. And for the rest of the episode, he's doing the whole thing about it's on my stomach and the doctor's there. And it ends the same way. Obviously, the story doesn't end with Sandra stealing the doctor's car, but also they do pull back the blanket and the snake is not there. And Harry gets really mad and he starts yelling and he's yelling at the doctor, just like in the short story. And Timber and the doctor leave. They have to drive together now because, again, the doctor's car has been stolen by this silly broad. Harry is now back in the place and he's just like, you know what? That was super stressful. I deserve a drink. And he goes to the liquor cabinet. And that's his great crime.
Succumbing to temptation.
So the Krite's in the liquor cabinet.
It's moved there.
And it bites him and he dies. And I have this to say about this episode of Tales of the Unexpected. Without the snake, the story is memorable. With the snake, less so. It's cheap. It's, I would say, expected. It blows my mind that in Tales of the Unexpected they said, you know what, there's got to be a snake. And it just makes me wonder, like it makes me wonder about Roald Dahl's feelings about the story, because he introduced the show, but I don't think it was like Alfred Hitchcock Presents where Hitch was like, my understanding was pretty involved in the show. I don't think Dahl was as involved in Tales of the Unexpected.
No, they obviously, I think they just like sent a crew to him, when they had all of the stories set for like the season or whatever.
Yeah.
And they just record him 2 minutes of saying something about each story and then just like dealt with it later,
Yeah. Which is basically what Wes Anderson did with Ralph Fiennes for all of the shorts that they made.
Well, sure. I mean, to a small degree, that's how filmmaking works. I'm just saying they probably just gave him the list of stories they were doing, sent a camera crew over and was like, just wing something, say something that whatever you want to say related to each story.
What if it's not related? What if I want to tell a little story before the story that has almost nothing to do with the story?
It's
like,
just about a different snake.
Okay, that's fine.
If that's all you got, then go for it.
I'll just go ahead and say I appreciated both of these for different reasons. I did not like either of them.
No, not ultimately. Like there's goofy, entertaining things about them.
Yes,
but that's about the extent of it.
But 2023, man, this is what I'm here for. Chef's kiss.
Well, I mean, it's already been established in our last episode. We like the whole thing that Anderson is doing with these.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, like the thing he decided to do, we talked about this in Henry Sugar, but like the thing he decided to do with these shorts is make them super theatrical. They feel like a stage play, so much so that there are like stage hands who are actively there handing things to the main actors. The actors always feel like they are actors in something, which means that there's this really fun variety of performances where like, okay, so it was written and directed by Wes Anderson. Benedict Cumberbatch plays Harry Pope. Dev Patel plays Supervisor Woods. He plays Timber. Ben Kingsley plays Dr. Ganderby. And Ralph Fiennes plays Roald Dahl at the end.
Yeah.
Each performance is so different. Dev's performance, he's so intense. He's so emotionally intense. He's like, I'm here. And he's also doing the thing where he's not just saying the things that he's saying in the reality of it. He's also narrating it.
Yeah,
so he's recounting
both.
all the narration back to the audience. And he's doing that very specific thing that, like, Wes Anderson is such a specific filmmaker, but I'm glad he never does this for any of his features because I think it would be too much. But in a short, having a character say like, oh no, I said, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. It works for short, but yeah.
So Dev's super, super intense. And I would say his like acting is really, I would, quote unquote good. Then Ben Kingsley is almost intentionally bad.
Yeah.
Like he's really wooden. But in a way that feels very, very intentional. Like that's just another layer to make it more interesting. Benedict is so reserved. Like the way Benedict is acting in the bed is exactly the way that Harry is described in the story about like how painful it is for him to get any word out because he's so deathly afraid. He's so much quieter and he's so much more still. And the tension is so much higher because of that. This is exactly what the story was.
I find it interesting that none of them use that final line of the story of the doctor saying he just needs a vacation. None of them, the first two I know don't, but this one I was expecting to, and it doesn't either. I don't have real thoughts about that other than it's weird.
Yeah,
because that seems like such a specific line.
It is this version's version of not having a snake.
Yeah, there you go.
Also, this one doesn't have a snake.
Yes. No snake. Here's a thing about this one that I really appreciated, and that is this one contextually and theme-wise really brings the bigotry a little more into focus.
Oh, sure.
Or at least I thought. It does that in several ways. One, by making, Dev Patel plays Woods, making both of the characters other than Harry Indian. So having it be that when Harry is going it doesn't pull any punches with the racist tirade at the end, which is good, first of all. And then it's a different context entirely when he's being racist towards the doctor, and then Woods, who is supposed to be his friend, and is also Indian, is like taking that in. That's like a whole like a slightly different a feel to it than other aspects of the previous ones. I also thought that Cumberbatch did an amazing job with what you were talking about, with like actually being terrified of the snake. But then towards the end, when he was getting fed up and didn't want to be in the bed anymore. I think he was doing an amazing job of like layering in his bigotry into his reactions, because he was starting to get annoyed with the doctor when he was like getting super emotional and not wanting to be in the bed anymore and can't take it anymore. It wasn't just that he was angry about the situation. You could see him like being racist to the doctor with his expressions.
Yeah, right.
That's some acting.
Yeah.
I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, it is weird to think that like you've got a character who basically can't move, but you still want him to have layers.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do, because in the other ones, he doesn't really have layers, because he's never really being quite as quiet as he's described as being in the book, and never being quite as loud. So there isn't a huge difference. But in this one, like, no, they achieve some layers with a very, very restrained performance.
Yeah.
Oh, and then at the very end, we get Roald Dahl doing his little outro with there actually is a snake. I think, Wes Anderson got to have his little like stop motion snake in a jar on Roald Dahl's little like writing pad. It's cute.
Yeah, it's a cute touch. But yeah.
I would love for Wes Anderson to do another batch of these at some point. Like every few years, I would love Wes Anderson to just do like a batch of Roald Dahl shorts that are done this way, because they do feel like, for a guy whose movies feel very theatrical and, formal, these feel even more so. Like this is no shackles whatsoever.
Let me ask you a question. I don't know how much we talked about this in the previous episode featuring some of these shorts, but obviously you've just said one part of it a couple minutes ago, where you're talking about like only in a short would it work to just have this particular like weird dialogue / narration style, because in a feature it would get annoying probably pretty quickly.
I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. Kind of tied to this question, obviously a notable thing about these Wes Anderson shorts, it's run through extremely quickly. It's done in all of these in a way that and it's not like he's done that in a lot of his like features. He doesn't really. There's exceptions, like Fantastic Mr. Fox has got a little bit of it, I feel like, where everything is spoken very fast, but these seem pointed, and I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that and why he was doing it.
No, I mean, I think it's something that Wes Anderson always enjoys using. It like he uses it to effect in the things that he makes. I was just rewatching after we were talking about Grand Budapest for the Around the World in 80 Days episode. I went back and rewatched it, and like that first scene where Ralph Fiennes is interviewing Zero as they're walking through the hotel, that's super fast. Like, it's
that's true.
So incredibly fast paced. That scene feels more like these shorts than I think anything else Wes Anderson has done. He uses it very specifically, and he uses it to great effect, but he uses it sparingly.
And I feel like maybe that's why he was excited to do these shorts, because he was like, I can do that for the whole time.
Yeah.
And it won't become off-putting. It won't be like my movies where I have to like go back and forth. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
It also makes me wonder what his interest is in that and why he likes it so much. It also makes me wonder, does Wes Anderson listen to podcasts and audiobooks in 1.5 time? Because
probably. All right, let's do some quadrants and then get out of here.
Okay.
So 1958 episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Do you think they cared about the source material, the short story Poison?
I think all of these cared about the source material. I think that they,
I'm going to disagree about that.
Well, I mean, getting away from the whole point by actually having there be a snake. So you're right. I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
I mean, I always have a problem with these questions, because I'm like, yeah, they sort of did. I mean, they cared about part of it, but I guess that's not caring about it.
I just feel like with these kind of anthology shows at that time, they were looking for stories. They were just looking for anything they could do, just looking for content.
This was the original content.
Yeah. Now, I didn't like this one, but I think it was successful.
Yeah, I mean, like if you had not read the short story, this would be an entertaining little piece of intrigue, Yeah. I think it's successful too.
1980 episode of Tales of the Unexpected. I don't think they cared.
No. Yeah.
I don't think it's successful.
Yeah, it's a little too much. Like the added stuff is bad. Even the stuff that's not added is fine.
Yeah, it's like bad to fine.
Yeah. And then there's a snake, so...
Surprising no one. 2023, Wes Anderson. Did we think he cared about the source material?
Yes.
Deeply. Was it successful?
Yes.
Amazingly so.
We like these a lot, in case anybody was curious. Go back to the previous episode and hear the unbelievable amounts of praise that we heap on the Swan.
Well, thank you all for joining. Yes, the Swan's so good. Thank you all for joining us. This has been Adapter Parish. You can always find us online at adapterparishcast.com. There you'll find our limited social links, contact information, show notes for this and every episode, and more. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in our next episode.
Thanks, everybody.